How's it going, guys? I am really excited about this animation. I love it so much. Here's all the big steps that it's going to take to build this thing. So we're going to head into geometry nodes, build the wires, and then displace them to give them that really tech kind of sci-fi look. Then we're going to quickly model that box thing in the middle and get the wires to be shooting upwards as well to finish off the design. After that, we're going to do a simple cell noise displacement to give the ground a similar kind of techie look. First, we're going to have to shade the wires and give them that character in the animation with our wave textures. Then we're going to shade the box to give it that interesting Voronoi animation as well. Then we're going to go ahead and shade the ground, and to finish it off, add an accent light for the corner. Hopefully that gives you a good recap of everything we're going to do. Before we get into that, my Black Friday sale just started. That's going to be going on for the rest of the month. You can get all of my courses and my tools for 50% off. You can get my geometry nodes course, my intro to motion graphics course, my shading course, and real-time materials, which is my pack of procedural materials, all for 50% off. You can hit the link in my bio. You can use the code D350 at checkout to get it 50% off. With that being said, let's head into this tutorial. All right, so the first step, we are going to go ahead and take this plane and just give it a name. We'll just call it wires 1, because we're going to do more than one set of wires here. And then head to geometry nodes, and the only amount of geometry nodes we're going to do is the wires. All the other stuff is just simple, basic OG Blender. So cool stuff, fun stuff, sweet stuff. And so let's go ahead and get a grid, and we'll plug him right here, doing his thing, living his life. We'll give it a size of like 3. And then notice specifically, we need to fix one thing, which is you can see 4 faces here. I'm going to click and just give them vertices on 2 so that we have nothing, so that things will instance only on these outside portions. Now what I want to do is convert this into a curve. So we'll get a mesh to curve, plug him here. And so now what this is going to allow me to do is to resample the curve, because once we instance things here, it's only going to instance on these corners here. I actually want it to instance all around. So if we resample it, it's going to add a bunch of points to this area. So I'm going to do it about 60 on the count, and we're going to go instance on points now. So we now have 60 points available to us that we can add a quadratic Bezier and plug him into instance. And then we can just click and drag and give them 0. And then on the Z, just bring them up. So now we have this guy. They actually need to be flattened and pointing outward. And pretty much anytime in geometry nodes, you need to do that. We're going to get a align rotation to vector, plug rotation there. And we can just get we're going to get the normal and tell it to do it based on the normal. So plug that into the vector. And then we can bring these guys out like this. So now we have these curves doing their thing. All right, so now we need to displace these wires to give them a little bit of character. So that is always going to be the set position node. And we need to realize the instances so that we can actually displace them, because geometry nodes isn't going to quite recognize these guys unless we do that. So now we're going to get a Voronoi texture and plug color into the offset. And so now it's displacing it on all axes at once, so we need to specify which one. So we're going to get a combine XYZ node and say displace on the Z. We like this. And then it's pretty low poly. We can bring the scale down and start to recognize the texture, but it's not going to give us what we want. So I'm going to give the resolution on the quadratic Bezier about 100. And now you'll be able to recognize, oh, hey, look at that. We have wires, and they're doing wire things, and they're fun, and they're cool, and we like them. So now that they're doing that, we can go ahead and give these guys some geometry. So we're going to go curve to mesh, and then we have to define how wide those tubes are going to be. So we're going to get a curve circle, plug that into the profile, and then bring your radius, something like that. Make it thick enough to see, but thin enough so that we can actually kind of enjoy how these guys look. And then now that we're here, we can go back to the layout and model the rest of our scene. So now we're going to go ahead and just get a floor, and we can kind of look at how that's looking. How close are these guys to the ground? So we can bring these guys as close to the ground as we can get. Something like this. Great. So now they're close to the ground, and we can go ahead and get a cube. I'm gonna hit Tab, and then just hold down Control and bring it up so that the anchor point is on the ground here. You don't have to do that part. It's just a little more convenient. And then I'm gonna go ahead and scale this box to fit here, and then just kind of overshoot it a little bit because we're gonna inset this. I'm gonna hit Tab, go to the face select, bring it down to something around here. And then I'm gonna hold down Alt, bring this middle guy, I'm gonna hit I for inset, and then I'm gonna hit E and then S to bring it in. So there we go. Now we have this, and then here on this top one, I'm gonna hit I to inset it. Maybe that's too big, I mean too small, something around here, and then hit E, and then bring it almost to the ground, but just not quite. So now he's doing what he wants to do. And let's give this guy a bevel modifier to just make him happy. And then here on the ground, I'm gonna hit Tab, right click, and I'm gonna subdivide him to 100 faces. Let's add 2 modifiers. So we're gonna add a subdivision surface modifier, bring your render to a value of 4, and then your viewport to whatever you want it to be. 3 is pretty comfortable for me, and then we can add in a displacement modifier. So that's crazy. We need to hit Control A and apply scale so he's not so crazy. Click New, click this button here for the texture. We can go over here to a distorted noise and then specifically bring this guy over to a cell noise and then give your size to like 4. I'm gonna bring my size to 3 actually, and then just go ahead and do maybe like 0.15 on the scale. So there we go. We now have this really cool floor. So now we have this really cool ground. What we're missing though is the tubes that are shooting out of the middle part. So let's go ahead and get another plane and call him wire 2. And give them the wires as well. So we'll go back to geometry nodes and quickly build that. So I'm gonna we're gonna go here. We're gonna give it a grid, plug that into the grid, and we can kind of see where he's located. So bring his scale to like something like that. Give it a vertices of 4, instance on points, quadratic Bezier, plug him there. And then, of course, bring it all down to 0. And then the Z, bring the Z up. Now you have these guys here in the middle that we can go ahead and do curve to mesh, curve circle, plug that into the profile, and then just do like 0.6, oops, 0.06 to match the rest of the scene. So now we have these guys, maybe bring them down to like 5. All right. So now we have this whole scene modeled out and ready to be shaded and lit and all that fun stuff. The shading is going to be the most crazy with these curves. So let's do that now and get it out of the way. So what we have to do is go ahead, give it a material. So I'm going to head into Eevee so we can see it, or the shader, the material preview, which uses Eevee. We're going to get a set material node. And we're going to get a new material and just say, okay, go here. And we need 2 attributes to be able to communicate with the shading before we leave here. So I'm going to highlight these guys. I'm going to go right here. I want to go right before the realize instances because we need a little space. And we're going to get two store named attribute nodes. So plug one here, plug one here. And I'm going to do the same thing on this guy. So we're going to give him set material. And we're going to give him a new material as well and just grab that second one here. And then store named attribute, we're going to get 2 of them. And they have to be separate. They're slightly different from each other. So I'm going to click back on the first wires and I'll just have this open so you can see which one I'm clicking. So this one, we're just call him R for random. This one, we're going to say S for spline. So first thing we need to do is tell it put a random value on all of the instances. And what that's going to do is assign a random color between black and white to each one of these curves. Black and white can also mean 1 and 0 and numbers in between 1 and 0, which help you assign randomness to things. And you'll see that happen in action once we throw this into the shader. So we need that. So we'll also do that on these curves here. So we'll just hit R, make sure he understands that it's the instances, plug a random value into it just like that. We'll go back here and then make sure, yep, he says instance. This guy can stay at point. We need to get a spline parameter node just so that the wave texture that we put on this guy will map correctly, because you'll see he won't do that by default. So we'll plug factor right into value and he's ready, and we'll just do that on this guy as well. Type in S for spline and we'll get a spline parameter node, plug factor in here. Now we're ready to shade. So let's head into the shading and make this work. So we'll click on this guy first because he's kind of the coolest one, really. And we're going to go here to scene world, scene lights, just so we can see this in action. So he's clicked. Wire number 1 is clicked. Let's go ahead, bring the roughness to something around here, and then give it a transmission. And so that's going to turn these guys into glass. And then emission, just give it a strength of 4. So now that we have that, we can get a color ramp, plug that into the color, and we can get a wave texture. Plug that here. And now you can see if I play with my phase offset, it's just not correct. It's weird and he doesn't know what to do. And we can go from linear to B-spline here and do like that. And it's just, it sucks. And so what we need to do is get a attribute, type in S, plug factor into vector, and now it is mapping correctly. So let's bring that scale up. But now all of these are kind of the same spot on each curve, creating this kind of stripe look. I don't want that. So we'll get another attribute node. And this one we'll do Mr. R and plug factor into the phase offset. So what we're going to do now is randomize the location of the phase offset. Because if I mute the attribute, you can see now it's a little bit jagged. So now that it's jagged, because it's assigning a random position of the phase offset per one of those curves, we're going to get a math node set to multiply, but instead we're going to do multiply add. We're going to multiply that effect, and then we can use an add to animate it. So there we go, and we can just bring up that multiply, and we can have some fun, and now it looks a little bit more organic and alive, and just like random bits of data is flowing through. Now let's click on these curves that are shooting upward and do the same thing. So bring your roughness down, transmission up, emission at a value of 4. We're going to get a wave texture, plug it into color. We need to get a color ramp set to B-spline, bring it in. And then we need to get a attribute, grab the S attribute and plug factor into the vector. So now it's doing that. We can just bring that scale up until our offset is having some fun. And then we can get another attribute, the R, but because this particular set of curves, we did not need to use a realize instances node, it's not gonna, it recognizes the instances in terms of this attribute node. He doesn't, so we have to switch this from geometry to instance, so it's the only difference here. Plug that into the phase offset and get another math node set to multiply add, and multiply that so that we can make it look like data is shooting out of him. Next thing we need to do is just create a metallic material for the floor and the cube. So let's click on the cube here, click new, and hit the period key to bring him back, make it metallic, a little bit dark. And then on this bottom one, we need to make a new one because we're going to do some slightly different things, but actually we will put that same material here on the bottom. And let's create our roughness setup first. So we'll get a color ramp, plug that into the roughness, get a noise texture, Control T with that node wrangler add-on, or just get a mapping and a texture coordinate node, plug that there. We can plug factor into the color ramp. So now we have some stuff here. So we'll just focus on him, bring that detail to 12, bring that roughness up a little bit. And then let's just crunch in this guy a little bit and then bring this color right up here. And we can head into cycles just to see how this roughness is looking in the cycles engine. So this is doing something fun. Maybe we can bring this down to be a little bit more reflective. And then what I like to do to give the noise a little bit more of an organic look is to get a new noise texture and plug color in so that it creates a little bit more of an organic look. And then you can just bring that detail to 12. And then we bring that scale down. So it gives it more of an organic look. So we can have some, we can enjoy it a little bit more. Okay, so let's click on this bottom guy. Notice how the displacement is not beveled. All these little cubes have no bevel on them. If I just go ahead and turn off the scene world scene lights, you can see it a little bit more clearly. There is no bevel on that. And so what we can do is right up here where it says material, we can just click the number 2 so that now we have a separate material from the little cube to this guy here on the floor. And we're going to add in a bevel node. So we'll just bring his samples up to like 10 because we can't really put a bevel modifier on the displacement. It's very unstable and it adds geometry. This doesn't add geometry. And so what we can do is find a place where we can just kind of see a lot of the geometry here like that. And we can enjoy the bevel from kind of a bird's eye view, and we'll plug normal right into normal. And then your radius, just kind of give it a small thing. There you go. So now we have a bevel on our displacement, and we've done it procedurally, and it's really going to make this look so much better. And then we can just kind of live with it from there. So now what we have to do, one more material, and then we'll add a gradient to the wireframe. Now what we can do is we'll go back to the flat view. So we'll go back here into the kind of the flat view. What I want to do is click on the cube, hit tab, and then hold down Alt and click to get this middle portion selected. And what I want to do is get a new material, and then we'll click new and we'll click assign. And so let's go ahead. We can go back into the material preview. And since it's now assigned, you can see it's a different thing. We can like turn on the emission and notice, okay, he's different. And so what we can do is just make it metallic, a darker metal, just like the one above him. But this case, we're going to go ahead and do one quick thing. We'll go back to edit mode here. I'm going to hit U for unwrap and use Smart UV Project. I'm going to click unwrap. So that's going to be the only unwrapping we need to do. And then we can get a color ramp, plug him here, and then we can get a Voronoi texture. And we can hit Control T and use those new UVs we just turned on. And then we're going to plug color right here. So now we'll bring that random down, bring that scale up so we get these we can get these cubes. And then in the mapping, we can scale it to be sort of a little bit more long ways, and then maybe scale it up a little bit. Then we can bring our color ramp in. But here's what I don't like. We'll go here to 4D. We can now animate it. But what I don't like is how perfectly flat the edges here are. So we can actually go to Smooth F1. And we can actually play with the smoothness of these edges to just give it a little bit of a smooth edge. And I think it really, I don't know, it gives it a better look. I like it so much better. And then we can go ahead and give it the purple that we're going to be using. So let's give it a brightness of 4, maybe higher than that. And this is the purple we're going to be transitioning. So I'm going to go ahead, hover over here, hit Control C, and then add it to Control V, that there. And then let's go ahead and create a gradient, a circular gradient that's going to be here in the middle. So the way we can control that is let's just go ahead and get a plane axis, just an empty, and he's going to help control our gradient. So we'll just leave that there. So we're going to use this whole little setup right here with the color ramp as a mask. And so we'll just go ahead and give it a little more space. And let's go ahead and get a mix RGB. Sorry, we're going to get a mix color node, plug him here, and plug him in here. We're going to make this top A black. So now we have our thing back. And then we're going to go ahead and get a color ramp, plug that into B, and we're going to get the two colors we want. So here, I'm just going to go ahead and copy the pink. And then we're also going to go and get a blue. Something like that. Now they're mixing, so we're going to go ahead and get a gradient texture. We're going to hit Control T and use the object coordinate and then plug color into factor. And you can see now it's starting to work. But what we want is a spherical gradient. And the object we want to grab is that empty. So now if I click on the empty and I just scale it, you can see that gradient working. So I'm just going to hit S and scale up that gradient like so. So now we start to see it working. And then we can just crunch in our color ramp to make that gradient transition far more obvious. So I'll just scale that gradient again. Now, and so you can crunch in this color ramp to change sort of how aggressive the transition from blue to pink is. So now we have this. We can go ahead and animate how this looks. So I'm going to give myself 30 frames. And then we can go here to the multiply add, which is going to create our movement. So now we have this. We're going to go back to frame 0. I'm going to hit I on the addend. And then just type in 2 asterisk pi, hit I. And so now they're doing that. If you want it to go outward, you would do -2 asterisk pi. And then on this guy, same exact thing. So we'll find the multiply add node. And then I believe this one does need to be negative in order to move right. So I'm going to hit I, go to the end, and I'm going to just type in -2 asterisk pi. Okay, so now we have it animating properly. And the last thing we need to animate is the W of our noise. And so we'll just do that. We'll do it a very small amount. So I'm going to hit I, go over here, and then I'm just going to say something like that. There we go. Okay, so now we have everything animating. Let's go ahead and select our camera angle. So Control-Alt-0, snap that to view. It didn't really work, right? That's okay. Don't mind my cat eating noises in the background. We're going to go from perspective to orthographic, and then we can just bring that out, and then we can scale up. These curves are not long enough. So we can just go here to the quadratic Bezier, lengthen them. There we go. Sweet. So we have this whole scene ready. Let's go ahead and see how it looks in cycles. Couple things. The world brightness, bring it down to black. We can go ahead and rotate our camera. Let's go here in the world and give it some volume. So give it a principled volume and then bring that volume down to like 0.01. Not really a whole lot, 0.03. And then it's hard to see the volume, especially because these curves aren't super, super bright. But we're going to add in a light that's going to hit it this direction. So we're going to go ahead, get in a area light. I'm going to hit G, move him over, and then move him way out here. I'm hitting G to move him around. And then hit R twice to rotate him. And then here in the light settings, we're going to switch it over to a disk. And I'm going to go back to my camera angle. He does need to be bigger though. And then we can go back to scene world, scene lights, or you can preview this in cycles. Give it like 1000 and then give it a pink, just like, or more of a purple really, and make it a little bit brighter, I think. And you could just copy the hex code if you want as well. And then I'm going to bring my spread to like 30. And then bring the power down to like 300. There we go. So now we have a nice light hitting it here, giving it a little bit of life, and then maybe bring that volume. The volume really is not that visible. Bring the volume up a little bit. And then you can go here to your shading and just bring the power of the curves in terms of how bright they are. Make them like a much brighter. emission. So that's going to really play with the volume. So there we go. Now that the lights are a little bit brighter, it fills out the scene. The color kind of expands outward a little bit more, and we're done. Of course, you can render this in Eevee or Cycles, whatever you feel like works better for you. But this is done. It's a 30-frame animation, so honestly, if you want to use Cycles, you can, and just let it render and let it do its thing. I'm going to render this guy out at 400 samples at 1920 by 1080. Render, I would render a PNG sequence, render animation, and when you're done, you'll have something like mine. So there you go. That was a super long one. I'm kind of enjoying these longer tutorials that I've been putting out lately. I think you guys have been enjoying them as well. So if you like them, I'll keep putting them out. Again, if you want to get the project file for this, it is available on Patreon. And like I mentioned in the beginning, my Black Friday sale is currently active. So if you want to learn more about geometry nodes, I have a course for that. If you want to learn about just motion graphics or get the real-time materials add-on, all of that is 50% off right now through the end of the month. So with that being said, thank you guys for watching. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next one.